Hi, and welcome to part 10 of automating Active Directory with PowerShell. So in the last video, we started on syncing our existing users by first creating a check username function, which would basically just take in the given name and the surname and the current username for that user and make sure that the username that was currently assigned was good. If it wasn't good, then it would give it a new username. So this is our function here, but definitely you can feel free to go watch the last video to get a full detailed breakdown on that. So in this video, like we said last time, is we are going to be actually syncing our existing users. So we're going to be checking their OU to the department that they're to the office that they're working at because our OUs are based on the office location. And then once we check that, we are going to want to check the username. And once we check both of those, then we are just going to go ahead and completely sync all the fields. So we kind of have a little bit of an idea of where we want to go. Kind of have all that written down here. I'm going to change the order and just put this up here because that's the order that I prefer to do it in. You could really do it in any order. This is the order that I'm going to be doing it today. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. What I like to do, so sometimes I like to just kind of try out the function here. But lately for these, as you've been seeing, I've been creating the function and just kind of testing the function with um, the dash verbose, just to really kind of see what's going through. Since there's so many steps in these functions, I really like to test them out as I build them. So let's create a function called sync sync existing users, and we're just going to put open close parentheses. So right now this should be fairly standard, putting in the commandlet binding and the param here, and we already know our first parameter. Well, I'm just going to write it because it's going to be very short here. We are going to be taking in our user sync data, and that's going to be in form of a hash table. This is what we know for sure we're going to be taking in so far. And then what we can do here is we can just simply just kind of do the synced users equals user sync data dot synced. That should be good. And then what we can do there is for each synced user in synced users, we're going to do a write verbose. And we're just going to do loading data for so this is really just loading the data for the current user. All we want to do this for is just to really make sure that we are able to go into this loop properly and able to see the data correctly. So let's go ahead and let's just give that a shot here. Let's do sync existing users. Right, so there's got to be a parameter that's misspelt somewhere here. So as I said in the previous video, if ever your parameters don't come up, it's probably a typo in your parameters. So just go check that out. So we have user sync data here, and let's go ahead and let's run this here. And we are going to run that verbosely. All right, so we actually do see that we do get our output here. So we get loading data and we get our employee names. So that is perfect. So let's go ahead and let's go back into our function here. So we know the first step that we want to do is um, check the OU and see if it needs to be changed. Now, in order to get that OU, we of course need to get the AD user, because right now in that user sync data, if we go back to that function, um, we actually see that we get the information from the CSV file. So we get the most up-to-date information from our employee file, which comes from our HR department or whichever department that would give you this file on the users, because technically Active Directory is based on the last time. So we want the most up-to-date information. So what we need to do to check against the old information is we need to pull up the Active Directory user. So what I'm going to do is create an AD user here. I'm going to do a get AD user, and I'm going to create a filter here. And this filter is going to be simply checking the employee, well, the unique ID, for me, it's employee ID, to make sure that it is equal to the unique ID of the user that we are looking at. So what this command is actually going to be looking like is actually a little bit complicated if you're not used to these style of functions here. But I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how that will work. So if we do this here, user sync data dot unique ID is equal, and then that we're going to do equal to the synced user dot user data sync dot unique ID. So the tab complete doesn't work in this here, but you will see that we will get our user back here. So that should be good. And then we are just going to make sure that we run it on the proper server here. So we're going to do user datasync.domain. And then we are going to want to bring in all the properties here because we're going to need things like distinguished name, and we just want to make sure that we have everything available to us. So we have this line complete here. So let's go ahead and let's see if we actually pulled back the correct information. So if we do a write verbose, user is currently in AD user dot distinguished. I just have to check the spelling here of that. Distinguished name. All right, so let's see if that works here. All right, so why isn't this working? It says that the server is coming back empty here. So let's go see why. So we have our user data sync, we have our user data sync dot domain, which should be right here. Seems to be correct. Not too sure why it is not. User sync data, user sync data, user sync data. Oh, that is why. User sync data dot domain. All right, so now if we run this here, we should get our OUs. And I'm going to guess we made a very similar typo in this one here. So let me just fix that here. User sync data. All right, so we actually do get our OUs here. So when we get the OUs back, you're going to notice that we get the container name as well. That's what the CN stands for. And then we get their username and we get their OU that they're currently in. So what we want to do is we only want this last part here, because this is their OU that we're going to have to check against. So let's go ahead and let's see if we can figure out this comparison that we have. So firstly, we can just check to see what OU they belong in, which that's very easy. We can very much copy paste this code here from the create users, which is the if not OU get the name, and that is going to be for synced user. And then we are going to do that should be okay. Synced user. And then what we can do here is we can take this right verbose, put it underneath here, and then we could do but should be in OU. So that should be good. All right, so here we have our results back. So we have Matthew Wilkins, but what we're going to be working with, Janie Malone here, since this is the last one that's in the list. It's just easier to find. So we have Janie Malone, which is currently in New York and should be in New York. So what we're going to want to do here is we're just going to come in our file here and we are going to modify this to Toronto, and we are going to see that we will now see that we need a change. So we're loading in the data for Janie Malone. We see that the current user is currently in, we get the container name, we get the OU of New York, but should be in the OU of Toronto. So how can we compare this to this? Because we already know that this is never going to match because the container name is there. So we need to match this OU without the container name to this. So let's go ahead and let's do that here. So what we're going to want to do is do an if statement. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an if statement here, and then we're going to do our AD user dot distinguished name. And then what we're going to want to do on this actually is we are going to want to actually do a split. So what that is, it's going to split this into an array of objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it on commas here. So just to show you guys what this kind of looks like here, I'm actually going to do a get AD user on Malone J properties. I'm just going to do an AD user. So if we do AD user dot distinguished name here, we're going to see that we get this. Now, if we do a dot split on here, now we're going to get 4 separate lines. So we get Malone J, New York, Jacked, and CA. So what we would want to do here, and we can reference the index position. So if we do 1, we'll just get New York. So what we want to do is we actually want to get all of these last 3 joined together by commas. So it basically looks like an OU just without the container name. So what we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to do a 1, then we're going to do dot dot, and we're going to do an open parentheses for a variable, and we're going to do AD user dot distinguished name dot length. And then this is going to get us just the 3 that we want. And then what we're going to do is we are going to want to do a dash join here, and we are going to join them with a comma, and then that should bring us our OU back. Perfect. So this is our command that we are going to want to do. So I'm just going to actually copy paste that here since we already just wrote it. It's going to be easier to copy paste it here if I actually can copy it. Perfect. So we have this here. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that that does not equal. So if that does not equal this OU that it needs to be in, so if we do a dash not equal to OU dot distinguished name, I think we might have an extra. There you go. Let's just wrap this actually in here. All right, so what we're going to want to do here now is we are just going to want to do a write verbose. OU needs to be changed. And let's go see if we get the OU needs to be changed. Perfect. So let me just remove this line, these 2 lines here. Okay, perfect. So what we do get at the end here is Janie Malone. We see that the OUs are different, and we actually do see that our if statement worked and the OU needs to be changed. So that's perfect here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a move AD object, and our AD object is going to be our AD user, and the server is going to be user think data dot domain, and the target path is going to be OU. So we want it to go to the OU that we got here, and we are going to move the user. So this is going to be perfect here. What we're just going to do, just for sake of keeping all of our code identical here, always having server at the end. So that is perfect. So we're already moving our user. So once we move our user, what I like to do is I like to fetch the user again. So we are just going to grab this here, and we are just going to put it right here. So we're re-grabbing the AD user object just to make sure that we have the new object at the correct OU, so we can make more changes and we aren't referencing an old user, which is going to be non-existent anymore because the distinguished name in it is not there. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to check the username. So we're going to do a username variable here to collect the new username. And we are going to do a check username, and then we are going to pass in synced user dot given name surname. We're going to pass in the synced user dot surname, and the current username we're going to pass in AD user dot SAM account name. And then the domain, we're going to pass in user sync data.domain. Perfect. So we grab the SAM account name from AD user because we don't store the username in our employee file. So we want to grab that from our AD user because that is the currently assigned username, and we want to see if it needs to be changed by the new surname and given name. So we're going to run that there. And then what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to check if that username is the same or different. So again, what we're going to do is we are just going to check if it's different, just to avoid an if-else statement. If I can just write an if statement, and if the else would be nothing happening, then I just have to write the if statement. The else is just kind of implied. If it doesn't fall into this category, don't do anything. So let's do an if statement here, and then we're going to do AD user dot SAM account name. And we're going to do not like, just this way it is not case sensitive this way. Just usernames aren't case sensitive in the first place, so I don't want that to affect it. If HR for some reason put a capital letter somewhere, I just don't want that to affect it. So now we're going to do AD user is not like username, and then open and close bracket. Now here what we're going to want to do is we're just going to do a write verbose again. Username needs to be changed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to need to do a couple things here. We're going to need to do 2 set AD objects, and we're going to do 1 rename AD object. The reason for that being the 2 set AD users is because we need to replace the SAM account name and the user principal name. But then we also need to rename the AD object because the actual name of the container will still be the old name, and we just need to rename it just so it stays consistent. So let's do a set AD user here. And then as always, we are going to give it our identity of AD user. And then we are going to go ahead and do a replace. And then we're going to do an @ symbol and parentheses here. So basically, like a little hash table here. And we are going to be replacing the user principal name first. And we are going to set this equal to be username at, and then user sync data.domain. And then we are going to put that in our server user sync data.domain. Perfect. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do something very similar right underneath, which is going to be set AD user identity AD user. We're going to do replace, and we're going to do SAM account name, and we are going to go ahead and change the name to just username, and the server is going to be user data.domain. And then we're going to do rename AD object. Identity is still going to be AD user, and the new name is going to be username. Perfect. So that should, and then we're just going to add our server that we're doing it on. So that should take care of that. So now all we need to do, now that we have our username change, our OU change, now the only thing left to do would be syncing our parameters, like our other objects, like the title, the department that the person has. But let's go and let's just make sure that this works here. So let's do this here. Let's make sure that the OU will change. So they say that the OU needs to be changed. So let's just go ahead and make sure that the OU changed. So we know that Janie Malone was in New York and should be in Toronto now. So actually, it opened up in Toronto here, and we actually do see our Janie Malone here. which is perfect. But we actually still see that the office still shows New York. And this is because we haven't updated the fields. So we've changed the OU. We've updated the username. We're going to do the username test in just a minute here. But we still haven't updated any of the other properties. So let's go ahead and let's actually test the username change here. So let's do employees here, and we're going to change Janie Malone's last name to Smith here. So we should get a Smith J. All right, so let's go ahead and let's test this out here. Perfect. So we got into the loop saying the username needs to be changed. It's in the right OU now at least. So let's go ahead and let's refresh this here. So we actually do see our Smith J now. We see Janie Malone. So we do see here that still it's not fully correct, right? Like we updated our usernames perfectly fine. We renamed our AD object, but none of the other fields are updated. So that is really what we need to focus on now. So let's go ahead and let's go back into our function and see a way that we can do this. Now, the easiest way to do this, very similarly to how we created a user, was through a hash table. So let me go ahead and let's create a hash table here. I'm going to call this one SetAD user params. And we're going to set that to a at symbol here. And let's put in some properties in here. The first one is going to be identity. And we're going to set that to username here. And then we are going to set the server to user sync data dot domain. Now, I could put in all the fields manually in here. I could put like title and all of those. The only thing that comes to that is now when we want to update all of our properties, we'll have to update it in the sync field map, but also in the new user params already, because the new user parameters, we set a lot of things here. So I didn't really want to take in the sync field map for this one. I just figured there's already a lot of other things that we're setting here that I just didn't want to add more complexity to that function. But for the set AD user, I mean, it's going to be, these are the only two that are really manually set. And then the rest, we can get it from the sync field map. So let's go ahead and let's actually take that as a parameter here. So let's add that here. We already know it's another hash table, so I'd rather just put that like this. And we are going to do sync field map. All right, and let's actually just go ahead and let's just sync field map, and we're going to put sync field map here. Now what we're going to want to do is we are actually going to want to loop through all the values in the sync field map, because all the values, as we know, are these, which these are the actual values in Active Directory. So that's what we want to change. So we have for each property in sync field in sync field map dot values. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to do set AD user params, and then we're going to put in the value of property. So we loop through the property and we actually add a entry into our hash table or dictionary for that property, and we're going to add the user, the synced user dot property for that. So this is basically saying for each Active Directory property in the sync field map, we're going to add that AD property into our hash table and grab that property from our CSV file so we can update it. And then all we need to do is do the set AD user, and then we do the @ symbol again to reference a set of parameters, and we do the set 80 user param. And let's go ahead and let's execute that here. And now if we go into our Toronto object, our Smith J, we will see Janie Smith in Toronto, and that is perfect. So let's give her a promotion here from junior developer to senior developer, just so you guys can see the position change. And we're actually going to move her to Dubai, and we're going to say that she went back to going by the name of Malone here. So everything is really changed. So let's go ahead and let's try to see if that works here. Perfect. So we got the OU changed, the username changed, the position changed. Everything's basically changed about this user. All right, so we actually moved her to Dubai here. So we actually do have Malone J. We have Janie Malone in Dubai. She's a senior developer now in development in Dubai. That is a perfect update of the user. So now that we got our sync working, we've got our creates working. The only thing left to really do here is to remove the users that have been either fired or that have quit their position. We're going to do that in the next video because this video has already been quite a long one. Make sure that you really understand this. The next video is going to be quite a bit shorter. That function is quite simple. Um, we add a little bit of complexity to it just to add some great functionality that I think we should have. But make sure you keep an eye out for that video. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do know when that video releases. And I will see you on the next video.